everyone. Glad that you are here on the first webinar broadcast of fall semester 2020. And we are believing that this is a representation for a lot of us getting back to normal, getting back to some semblance of normal at least. So glad that you are here. So excited about this semester. If you've been with us for previous semesters, you'll see that we have a brand new classroom. We've worked really hard this summer on getting that up and running for you guys, which is great. And then we are just happy to kick off our webinars tonight. So real briefly, if this is your first semester with us, let me just kind of provide you a lay of the land. So whenever you're in DLI, you'll have courses that you're taking throughout the semester. Introduction to Bible and Old Testament are your two primary courses this semester. And that gives you an academic or just a biblical overview of how to study and things that you need to know. We start with the Bible because, and I'm sure Pastor Micah would agree with me, that knowing the Bible is really the first thing. And so sometimes we put the cart before the horse, and we try to get into a lot of leadership development, a lot of giving you the culture of our organization before we've taken time to make, hey, do you know Abraham and Moses and Noah? Let's make sure we know the basics first before we. So the first semester is very much based on biblical studies, but then concurrent to all of your courses online, there's the internship course, and that's where we get really practical and help you serve in your local church. So this semester, we will be focusing all of our webinars on the character of a leader, And what we hope to do is to give you some tools that can really help you serve where you're serving and make you better for your church and make you better as you grow. So that's a little bit of what we're doing tonight. Is Pastor Micah is going to talk to us and give us an overview of the life of character in leadership. So glad that you are with us. Right after the webinar, we'll talk for a few minutes. At any time that you have questions about what we're discussing, want further clarification, you can pop it in the Q&A box. We'll be happy to answer questions at the end. And then also, we'll try to wrap up this part of it around 7:30. And as soon as the 7:30 rolls around, we'll let Pastor Micah go. And if you have questions about the program itself, how your courses work, where to find things, I can't access a quiz, whatever it is, you can ask us those questions after we're done, and I'll hang out for a little bit and answer those. So let's kick it off. Our guest tonight is Pastor Micah Pelkey from Ohio, and pastors a great church there, Storyside. I've been so excited. I feel like I may have made a tactical error, Pastor Micah, and that is that I think we're going to start so high this semester that none of the other guests are going to be able to live up to it, because I just have so much respect from watching what you guys are doing from afar. And literally, you're one of those guys that I've heard about a long time before I met you. And everyone speaks so highly of you and what God's done at Storyside. So why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the church, establish that ethos, and then we will get started.
Thank you so much, Pastor Landon, for allowing me the opportunity to be here and to share a little bit tonight of our story. And just seeing everyone logging on, the comments, all over the country and even some out of the country. I saw East Africa on there, and I think it was Philippines, a few of them. But so glad everyone's on here tonight. And a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Canada. I often joke because as soon as I say that, people always say which part, and I tell them my whole body. That's not funny, but I born and raised in New Brunswick above Maine. And then my dad started some churches in Prince Edward Island, British Columbia. He pastored, and then in Montreal, Quebec, which is where I went to high school and then off to Bible college. But bounced around Canada growing up, and then I traveled for a few years. Spent a year actually in Texas. Went to Beaumont, thought I was there for a week in 1995, and a year later I was speaking at different churches and meeting a lot of great friends in that season. My wife is from Ohio, so I joke that she won. but we are here in Ohio, and our church will be 18 years old. Our church will be 18 next March. So we have 4 locations. 3 are up and operable right now, but our church will be 18 years old next March. And I have 4 kids. My oldest is 20. I have 3 daughters, 20, 18, 12, and my little boy is 10. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow. So 18, the church is 18 years old, and
18 years old next March.
3 of 4 campuses operating.
Yep.
It's not really our task, but I think what's on everyone's mind is how did you guys do through this crisis that we've all experienced together the last several months?
Yeah, so we were online only for 3 months, right around 3 months, from March 15th forward, and just really tried to reinvent a lot of what the church was doing. So we did hundreds of prayer visits. We'd pull into people's driveways and pray over people just from their driveway. They'd stand on the front porch or the window, or really tried to love and shepherd strong. And then, of course, like everyone else, focus on all the ways we needed to improve online, which seemed, I think, to expose all of us, or at least would expose us. So we tried to make some of those improvements. And then we've been back on site as well for the last couple months.
Great. All right. Wonderful. Well, I know you've, this is an area I've had the privilege of hearing you speak a couple of times. And so as we delve into this particular topic, so once again, to back up and give the big view, we're going to spend this semester talking a lot about character, because that underpins everything. We believe that character is foundational. Your character is your ceiling. You never rise above that. And then in coming semesters, we'll deal with calling and how to discover what God has uniquely wired you to do through your personality and individual gifting. And then we'll talk a little bit on the next semester about competence, which is learning how to do whatever you're doing with excellence in a way that pleases God. And then finally, we'll talk about culture. So the 4 C's. So the final one is culture, where this is like, okay, so you're doing something and you're doing it well, but you also have to do it in the right way that fits the organization that you're called to serve in. So this semester is very foundational. And when I heard you speak, I knew that this will be a great fit for you. And I know you'll really teach us and lead us well tonight. So why don't you just dive into your notes? I think we're going to John's Gospel, right?
Yes. So as we talk about character tonight, just to start a little bit with our story, I feel like probably the first 7 or 8 years of Storyside, we were called City Church at the time, but we bounced around 80 people, 120 people, 100 people, and not that it's all about numbers, but numbers do matter. They are people. They have a story. And I was in a service one night with my wife. It was not a church that we would go to often, maybe a couple of times ever. And they had a guest speaker from England, and he called us out at the end of the service and began to share some things that he felt for my wife and I. Shared about our miscarriage and just some pretty serious things that caught my attention for sure. But one of the things he said God wants to do, and he began to share with me some of the growth and expansion and things of that nature that God wanted to do with our church. But he said, God said to tell you that you're not ready yet, and it's you, meaning me. He said, God said that you need to get right, and when you get right, that all of these things were basically waiting. And so, I began to navigate that. It's a little bit of what we'll talk about in the next few minutes, but began to navigate through that in my own life of what were the ways that I needed to increase, whether it was character, or the other words that would go into that. And it was everything from, I think, revisiting why I was doing what I was doing, and counseling and so many things. So not to get too deep into that, but, a lot of times even now people will come to Storyside and we've had the honor, I know Bo Kilgore and different people reached out today and said, hey, we're going to be online tonight with DLI. And, they've been here and spent several days. But so many people that will say, Pastor Micah, what was the key? What did you do? And, I can't speak for everyone else's journey. Usually you know your story the best, but I often tell people, for us, it wasn't 5 keys to this or 7 steps to that. I went through 4 years of coaching. I did a lot of things in that season. But I would say the biggest thing is I asked God just to fix me. And whether that was my motives, my intentions, my spirit, to work on me. And so I hope even in our time together tonight, as we're launching this semester, that would be my prayer, that we're not just looking for the keys to double or triple or quadruple our ministries or our influence, whatever area you serve. Those are all great, but that we would almost just revisit, God, fix me, like search me. If there's anything in me that needs to change, do that. And so that's what I want to share just a little bit about tonight. E.M. Bound said in his classic book, The Power of Prayer, men are God's method. The church is often looking for better methods, but God is looking for better men. And so I think that's a great foundation for all of us as we look at character tonight. I want to read out of John chapter 2. It's the story of what we would know as the first miracle of Jesus. And so I love first. Anywhere in the Bible, I love to look at first. What was the precedent? How did it start? What did the beginning look like? And so in our time together, I want to read these first 11 verses of John 2. It says, on the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? Mine hour is not yet come. His mother said to the servants, I want you to notice this, do whatever he tells you. Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. They filled them up to the brim, and he said to them, now draw some out, take it to the master of the feast. So they took it, and the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine. They did not know where it came from. This is very important, I think, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. Final verse 11. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. At any point, if you've got a question or a thought, you want to put it there in the comments, or Pastor Landon, if you want to stop or ask anything or input. But just a few thoughts from this passage that I wanted to encourage all of us as we talk about character. The first thing when I read this story is you see the beginning of miracles. You see really the launch of Jesus' ministry. We don't hear a lot between 12 and 30, so people will look at this 30 to 33 and a half range of Christ as his ministry season. And so this ministry is somewhat going to be launched here in this passage with miracles. And the miracles are really going to be a byproduct not only of Christ, but the miracles are going to be a byproduct of men that we never hear about their name. And so you are going to have these unnamed individuals that are going to kickstart miracles. And sometimes, I think, I went to Bible college in 1990, and so this is my 30th year of some form of ministry, whether it's traveling or interning or pastoring. And sometimes if we're not careful, I've been guilty of it, that we want to make sure our name is recognized with the miracle. Like I want miracles. I want a miraculous ministry, Micah, but I want my name tied into it. And sometimes great miracle seasons and great growth could actually be started with almost a willingness to say, I'm okay if my name doesn't get notoriety. I'm okay if I don't get all the followers, or, I'm not the front of the promo, or I'm okay with that. And so, if we're not careful, sometimes I think we can start ministry, or it could be even this semester, and saying, God, I know there's so much in me, and I want you to expand, and I want you to, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if we're not careful, I think we can get our priorities mixed up, and we want to make a name, and we forget that it's not necessarily about making the name. It's about launching the power of God and the presence of God. And so, when you read these 11 verses, the Bible says they invited Jesus to the wedding, and this is something that would seem so basic that I'm going to share just a few thoughts that I want to extract from this, but this would seem so basic and simplistic, but a reminder to all of us: don't do life without Jesus. And specifically tonight, as I'm talking to leaders, don't do ministry without Jesus. And I know it would be easy to say, Micah, of course not. But the reality is that we can develop an entrepreneurial approach. We can develop a business approach. We could almost copy and paste some of these steps and protocols and policies. We could almost copy and paste that in what would work at a company or factory or business. Now all of a sudden we're going to do it in the church, and it could generate a crowd. It could generate people. And again, I'm not an either or guy. I know it's both. But I do think that all of us here, as we start this semester and we begin with character, I think it's so important for us just to remind ourselves, don't do life without Jesus. Don't catch yourself going to the meetings and going, whether or not it's the planning sessions or planning center, or, you can get so busy and caught up in all these schedules and then be like, wow, my prayer life isn't the greatest, or my Bible time's not the greatest, or, before we know it, we're doing a lot of things without Jesus. And so I just want to challenge all of us, myself included. I don't want to do ministry without Jesus. And that would seem so simple, but it's really important. It's really important, I think, for all of us. And so that is where I would just start us in these 11 verses, and then a couple of things I would extract out of it.
Let me jump in if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here. I think one thing that we've learned here over the past several months is that many of us had to decide, like, are we doing what we do because we love Jesus and love people?
Yep.
Or are we doing it for the crowds because we've not really had them? Are we doing it for the amens because they're not the same whenever when they're typed amen and not. So I think we've all been through this kind of pruning season, and I know that towards the beginning of this of COVID, I had to have that conversation with myself and with God. It's like, God, search my heart here, because like I'm not preaching every weekend. I'm not doing the things that I normally do. I'm not. The crowds are not what they. My self-worth used to be like, how full's the building on Sunday? And well, the same answer every week was not at all. We all had record crowds, but not the good kind of records. So we had that litmus test of like, are we doing this because we love Jesus and inviting Jesus as part of it, or are we doing it out of some other ambition? And I think going back now, many of us are starting to go back into in-person ministry, that we go with that same mentality to really check our motives as we re-enter.
Yeah, and one thing I'm reminded, even just hearing you share that, Pastor Landon, I've shared the story before, but I think of it all the time and maybe it'll help someone tonight, but the little boy that's asking his dad to go outside and shoot hoops. And my little boy plays baseball, football, basketball. His name's Micah Solomon. But the story is the little boy's asking his dad to go outside and shoot hoops, and the dad's reading the USA Today. It's years back, but if you've seen the USA Today newspaper on the different sections, but there's one back page on one of the sections that's the weather, and the whole page is like different colors, like red, yellow, green, and there's different cities and the map, and you can see the weather on this entire back page of the USA Today, the newspaper. And this was a true story that the boy kept persistently asking his dad, will you go outside and shoot hoops? Will you go outside and shoot hoops? And the dad was saying, I'm actually trying to read the paper. And the boy was bugging him a little bit. And the true story is that the dad takes this back part of the newspaper and shreds it, like rips it up into a bunch of pieces, threw it on the floor, and told his son, he said, when you put all of that back together, come inside and get me, and I'll play basketball with you. And so he thought he got some time and was reading the newspaper. The true story is the boy was back in less than 10 minutes. And the dad was blown away that he was able to put all of those maps and all of those regions, or Tokyo and Paris, and he couldn't believe that the son put the world back together in minutes. And so when the dad asked the boy how that was even possible, there was pieces everywhere. And the son had put it all back together, taped it all back together. And the little boy told his dad, he said, I never put the world back together. He didn't even know it was the world. On the back side of that weather page was an advertisement for a Men's Warehouse, a clothing store, and it was a full page picture of a man. And the little boy said, I put the man together. Wow. And you know, the principle of the story was that sometimes we spend all of our time putting the world together, when in reality, if we would put the man together, the world will fall in place. Yeah. And so hopefully even tonight, as we're talking about character, that if our takeaway was, I want to put the man together. I want this to be about Jesus. I want to get back to, why am I even doing this? I think that would be a great win for all of us tonight, is if we just remind ourselves, I don't want to go to a wedding without Jesus. I don't want to go to a church service without Jesus. I don't want a student night without Jesus. I don't want a planning meeting without Jesus. If Jesus isn't in it, I don't want to be part of it. And I think that's a great reminder for all of us. So a couple of things that jumped out to me when I read this, Pastor Landon, is ministry life can run out. So when we read this story, the Bible says they ran out of wine. And, you know, I pause to give too many details about my parents, because I absolutely love my mom and dad. But my dad, you know, planted churches, was a youth president at one point. Like the region he would have been over with that was 60 some churches. And my dad would preach at conferences. And I remember as a kid growing up, just seeing my dad involved in so much. And the long story short is, you know, my parents got divorced last year. It was one of the toughest things I ever went through. And they got divorced 47 years into marriage, I think it was. And it was devastating to me. And I only say that because I think everyone, if we're not careful, you run out of a lot of things. Maybe not in this story, you're running out of wine, but you can run out of vision. I think you can run out of peace, out of joy. I think you can run out of character. We're talking about it tonight. You have some moments in your life where you run out, and how you deal with that, how you handle that, how you respond to that really matters. And so I don't think that it would be fair. I don't think it would be fair for me to join these leaders tonight, and especially younger leaders, and tell them, you know, if you say yes to Jesus, if you say yes to the call of God, you're never going to run out. When in reality, in my 30 years, not only have I ran out, I've watched tons of people run out, you know, where they ran out of money or there's always going to be moments where you run out of something in ministry. And I think in those moments, that character and the call of God is what's going to keep you solidified and anchored. I really do think that's a key. And so in this story, they run out, and the mother of Jesus says they have no wine. She used that word no. And I would just submit to you that I think a lot of times our ministry will be determined or be decided by how we handle our no seasons, the NO. So, you know, you're working for someone, and that lead pastor or vision pastor may tell you no. Or you pray a prayer and God or the Holy Spirit's going to tell you no. Or an accountability or responsibility partner, someone says no, and it could be no to your desire. It could be, no budget. It could be maybe in your region, zoning, building. I feel like I've been through all those types of things before, and you get a no from that. How you handle your no seasons really matters in ministry. I think character is exposed. If you're always hearing yes, you're awesome, yes, you're amazing, yes, you're the best, yes, you can do it, yes. I often say, I don't think you really know someone, K-N-O-W. I don't think you really know someone until you tell them no. And so in all of our lives, you don't really know K-N-O-W. You don't really know Micah until you tell them no, N-O. And when someone hears no, a lot of times then you see how they're going to respond. Then you see those emotions stirred up. Then you see those things. And so in this story, they have no wine. And really, I've always been drawn to this story, but in this story, they have no wine. Jesus is conversing, talking with his mother, and the mother of Jesus says to these servants, whatever he says to you, do it. And I think the whole story is going to hinge on this moment, this verse. I see it all the time. We've had hundreds of interns here at Storyside on different levels and different summers and seasons. And I think everything is going to hinge on this verse right here, this beginning of miracles. This launch of the ministry is going to be determined by these individuals who we never know their name. We're not going to know this notoriety level, and we're going to find out, are they willing to do whatever? And so the word whatever, even tonight, maybe you're listening to the session and you're saying, I only lead worship. Well, what I would hear out of that is I'm not willing to do whatever. Or, I'm only willing to do student ministry, or well, the beginning of miracles in this passage was birthed out of whatever. It wasn't birthed out of I'm just a fill in the blank. And so, I don't want to get off track tonight on a Tuesday night, but I would say I think more marriages would work if people would be willing to do whatever. When people's like, I'm not going to counseling, I'm not reading a book, what you're saying is I'm not willing to do whatever. I think more people could have jobs if they'd be willing to do whatever. I'm not working this shift and I'm not flipping a hamburger, and then you're not willing to do whatever. And so sometimes in ministry, people can come into the church and say, God, I want you to use me. God, here's my hands, here's my feet. I want to do something. I want a miraculous ministry. Well, are you willing to do whatever? Because if you're like, well, I'm not going to do set up and tear down, and I'm not going to give my evenings, and well, then you're not willing to do whatever. And so I know this is really basic tonight to say, don't do ministry without Jesus, and don't enter into ministry without having a whatever mentality, but it's really important. I think some of these concepts is what will keep you going year after year after year, weekend after weekend, COVID and any other circumstance.
And I think to this generation, Pastor Micah, too.
Right.
I think to this generation where often we focus so much on like, what is my personality style? What is my gifting?
No.
And so there's this mentality of like, well, God's created you to be you, and you got to learn to say no to things. And you listen to Craig Rochelle, and he's like, well, you got to say no to everything except for okay, but you're not Craig Rochelle yet. So at some point we have to get beyond this really narrow mindset of like, well, I'm only going to do what I'm called to do, or because you grew up in an era, and I did too, where you just were to do ministry. You had to be willing to do whatever was asked of you. And if you didn't, if you've not mastered the chair stacking ministry, then you've still got a long way to go. But I do think as we kind of balance, because the cultural narrative now is that God's uniquely gifted you, wired you, created you to do something specific that you're really good at, and it's going to bring you joy and fulfillment and peace whenever you do it. That's true. But on the other hand, it's like, whether God called you to go to the nursery or not, if there's a bunch of babies there and no one to work, then you're just willing to do whatever.
Whatever. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's why I said it earlier, but I don't think it's an either or thing. I do think it's both. And I don't expect everyone to go back to your journey, my journey, and maybe the whatever approach that we were raised in. I could tell 100 stories and we don't have time, but I remember interning one summer in Bible college, and the church had priced, they had two parking lots, a higher level, a lower level, and they had priced to get the lines repainted on the church parking lot. And the two bids came back and they thought it was too high. And so they told me they wanted me to hand paint all the lines on the parking lot. And so I remember getting like 2x4s and trying to space them out and like painting in between the parking lines, and borderline bitter a little bit at times of, I can't believe you guys just didn't pay whatever the bid was. But I look back in those seasons of my life and I'm really glad that God was trying to work in my heart. Micah, do whatever. Micah, do whatever. Micah, do whatever. Because if we narrow it down, I think Jesus is our greatest example. Jesus was willing to do whatever. And so I think if we're going to be not only Christ followers, but follow him in our calling, I think we've got to be willing to do whatever. So, my last few thoughts here, Pastor Landon, is you have these guys who evidently didn't seem like, hey, just so you know, I need you to put my name in the story. We never do find out their name. We see that they're willing to do whatever. And then, I've read this story, but last night it's, I don't know, maybe 11 o'clock, and I don't want to get emotional with it, but man, it was a part of this story last night that jumped out to me just fresh. When the mother of Jesus said, whatever he says to you, do it. And those words he says just jumped out off the page. And I've read this story so many times, but I saw those two words differently last night. And that's where, for me, it just was, I want to value the voice of God in my life. Whatever he says, because especially in 2020, I could have 100 different voices. I think you should do this, and I think you should open, and I think you should, and I love wisdom, and I love counsel, and I have a pastor, Kevin Gerald. I love my pastor. I have people, and I'm grateful for voices. But if I'm not careful, and I think as leaders, if we're not careful, we can start getting the voices and the opinions of everyone else. And I miss this part of the story, whatever he says. Micah, what is he saying to you? What is he speaking to you? And I just want to I just want to challenge, everyone tonight in this opening session of character, that I think a big part of building your character is not only to be willing to do whatever, but to say, God, I want to be sensitive to your spirit. I want to hear that still small voice, and whatever he says. And sometimes what he says, it may not even be popular opinion. It may, it may even rub, our flesh side a little bit the wrong way, but just valuing the voice of God. And then the Bible says that they're told to fill the water pots with water. And this is where I would hope, even in our final few minutes, maybe God would just stir your vision and faith. The Bible says that they each held 20 to 30 gallons. And they said, fill them with water. And this little part of the story, they filled them up to the brim. I don't think anyone would have, 20 to 30 gallons is quite a bit. I don't think anyone would have complained if they put in 15. I think anyone would have complained if they left some room at the top. It's going to spill over anyway. But the Bible says they filled them up to the brim. And I just wrote down here, I wrote down here in my notes, don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourself short. And so again, my story, what would it be, 10 years ago now? Yeah, probably right around 10 years ago now. We're about 100 people. I buy a building in Belleville, Ohio. The population, you could Google it. Belleville, Ohio, I think our population right now is 1,900 or 1,800 or something, cornfields everywhere. And I remember a good friend of mine telling me, Micah, if you could ever grow Storyside to 500, in the middle of nowhere in the country, if you could ever grow to 500, that would be amazing. And I remember thinking that at 100, like, wow, 500 would be a lot. And never realizing even what God would do in our journey the last 10 years here and other locations. But my point being that I think God has helped me to really try to stir up on the inside of me, Micah, David, Pelkey, Micah, fill it up to the brim, fill it up to the brim, fill it up to the brim. It doesn't matter if it's a cornfield. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of nowhere. Fill it up to the, doesn't matter if it's feet, washing water. It doesn't matter if it's hand washing water. Fill it up. Who knows where this is going to go, how it's going to play it out, but fill it up to the brim. And so, whether or not it's a young leader that's listening tonight, or maybe it's a pastor, or a missionary, or business leader, I just want to challenge someone, even in 2020. I know COVID, all those different things, but whatever it is, maybe in the natural, it's saying, go halfway, go 3/4. Micah, maybe you could run 500, but let faith just be stirred as you're starting this semester to say, God, I want to believe all the way up to the brim. I have no idea what you want me to do, and I'm willing to do whatever, and I want to be sensitive to your voice, but fill it up all the way to the brim and just believe in a miraculous kind of ministry. And so I was reading recently in Wales in 1904, 27-year-old Evan Roberts, maybe you've heard the name, but he was burdened to pray for 100,000 souls. And I've read that people almost made light or took away from his prayer, like, how are you ever going to reach 100,000 souls? But in the Welsh revival, just that one revival alone, when they talk about the souls that were saved, all numbers are more than 100,000 just in that revival. And so I don't know what you're praying about. I don't know what you're believing for, but even if everyone else, maybe doesn't applaud it or affirm it, or, believe all the way to the brim, and just let God know, I'm believing big, and I'm not believing big for me, I'm believing big for the kingdom. I'm believing big for the call of God on my life. And so that's something that I want to encourage you. And then I would close with this. Don't forget where you started. This would rival the whatever word for me of in the story. I'm just drawn to these little parts of the story. But this element of this miracle, where it says that when the waters turn to wine and the governor's going to say it's the best ever, you kept the best till the last. But then just that little part of the story, Pastor Landon, where it says, no one knew where the water came from. No one knew it was this rite of purification, or they would use it after long days in the dust and desert and travel, and they're cleaning off the dirt, and no one knew. But then it says, but the servants knew.
Yeah.
And here's something that I think in ministry that is so important for all of us, is when the water becomes wine, and when the church grows, and when you write your book, and when God uses you, and when you write that song and God opens doors and favor, and when you start serving in that ministry and your kids or students area doubles or triples or quadruples, or when water to wine moments happen. And God has shown us over and over and over again, church after church, era after era, generation after generation, he knows how to turn water to wine. When it happens, it is so important that you never forget where you came from.
Wow.
And so if you forget where you came from, you can start to take some of the credit for the wine. You can start to take some of the credit, like, I'm a good leader and it's my personality and I'm this number on the Enneagram, and I went to this schooling, and I'm all for a lot of those things. But I think it's really important that when people are retweeting the tweet, or they're liking your story, or you're getting all these comments like, whoa, this is the best wine ever, you're awesome, that there's an inner voice that whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, you just have an inner voice that says, but I know where I came from. And I know where this started. I know where it began. And when that is in there, I think God is able to continue to just pour out wine, because he knows that on the inside of you, that there is something to say. But if it wasn't for Jesus, if it wasn't for the miracle in my life, I know where it came from. And so when you remember some of those moments where you're like, Micah, I don't know why he's using me. Good. I'm glad that you don't forget where the water came from. Pastor Micah, there's so many other people that God could have called. Good. I'm glad that inner voice is on the inside of you. And don't ever squelch that. Don't ever quiet that voice. It's not a false humility thing. It's not. I think it's important for all of us to have it on the inside of us that just tells us, if it wasn't for God, if it wasn't for His anointing, if it wasn't for Jesus, and it just reminds us, I know where the water came from. And so those are just a few thoughts that I wanted to encourage you with tonight. And, maybe just a final thought, don't quit too quick. I've heard it said that, the weddings, one of my best friends here in town, Rabbi Holbrook, I talk to him all the time and get his perspective on stories, and supposed to connect with him tomorrow. But their weddings would be about 3 days. Some would last 7 days, but they would go days in this big party. And when they would run out of wine, the perception or belief would be, Pastor Landon, that a lot of people could have left the party, left the feast, left the ceremony. And can you imagine the next day, the next week, when they heard, that Jesus turned water to wine? That would definitely be something that you would regret you left early and walked out of. And so I don't know where you're at in your ministry right now. Maybe you feel like, Pastor Micah, I've been trying. I remember those first 8 or 9 years of Storyside, 100 people, and I got a bunch of resignation letters and lay on the floor depressed, and, hearing, you got to fix you. And I just look back on some of those seasons of my life, and I'm so, I'm just sitting in this empty office, and I really do feel the Holy Spirit tonight. I hope God speaks to you, but I'm so glad, coming up on 18 years, I'm so glad I didn't leave too early. And I don't know everyone that's listening tonight, but I'm glad you signed up. I'm glad you bought your books. I'm glad you're part of this year. And you might have a million voices that go through in your head saying, why don't you just walk out? Why don't you leave? Why don't you throw in the towel? It's not working. Not working in ministry, calling church, whatever it may be. I want to challenge you tonight on a Tuesday night. Don't walk out too quick. Don't be the person that looks back and said, wow, I should have stuck this thing out. I believe in miracles. I believe that Jesus can give you a miracle. And so when we get, I think our priorities in perspective, when we truly are willing to say, I'll do whatever, and I don't need my name in all of it, I think God can begin to do some amazing things. And that's my prayer even for you guys tonight, is that God will stir up the call of God in your life. This is going to be an awesome next few months. And you're going to learn a ton of things about leadership and systems and your capacity, and all of that matters. But right out of the gate, just to start by saying, I want to get first things first, the main thing. And that is, I want my character, I want my heart, I want my spirit, my motives. I want all those things to be pure. And then let's build on that foundation. So thank you so much, Pastor Landon, for letting me share for a few minutes.
Thank you. And students have some questions coming in, and if you have more, try to put them in the Q&A box just at the bottom of your screen. And it's easier for us to see them there. We could talk about this for hours. You just did such a great job. Also, one of my favorite stories, and pulled out several things tonight that I've never seen, never noticed. And I think the thing that spoke most directly to me tonight, and I think for many others, was your last point about not quitting too early, and how they could have left, many could have left the wedding early. I was reading not too long ago in Luke, I believe it's Luke chapter 13, where there was a woman who was bent over by a disabling spirit or a crippling spirit, and she had been that way for 18 years. Yeah. And she goes up to synagogue one day, and Jesus happens to be there, and she receives her miracle. And similar to what you just said, it struck me that every Saturday for 18 years, she'd been coming to synagogue, and she would have had 18 years worth of Saturdays to say, it's never going to happen for me. I'm disappointed. Why should I go through the trouble, the physical turmoil of getting here? and she just happened to be there whenever Jesus happened to be there. And what would have happened if she would have sat out that Saturday? And I think so long we quit too early, and we have to keep showing up until the miracle happens. And
That's really good.
there'll be weeks and months and sometimes years where it feels like the miracle's not happening. But it's just that process of showing up, because eventually when we show up, he's going to show up. And whenever my need shows up and his miracle and his miraculous power shows up, then it's the breeding ground for something really cool. Let's dive into a couple questions here. So if you are leading, so you're leading a team, you're leading some volunteers. What do you do about the gauging and addressing the character of the team that you're leading? And the question is particularly about volunteers. So I think that's a very interesting question on what we expect of, team members versus leaders and things of that nature. Let's talk about assessing and developing the character of the teams you lead.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have all the answers on this by any means, but for me, one of the rules of thumb is this occasional struggles or sin, or is it habitual? So that's something I always go to. The Bible says if anyone says they don't sin or struggle, they're lying.
Right.
So I think all of us have occasional seasons or moments where there's things in our lives we need to work on. And again, I'm answering it through the lens of a volunteer. But then Romans and others would tell us, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. So for me, that's habitual. So I'm not sure exactly the question, maybe, but on my end, if I was dealing with a volunteer or someone on our team, I would want to know, are you wanting to change? Are you wanting to improve? Are you wanting to get better? Is this occasional that you are really trying, to improve and grow out of? Or is this habitual where you have no desire to change and you're just going to continue in sin that grace may abound kind of a thing? And I definitely would have more grace for the occasional person that's trying to change than I would the person who really has no intention of changing. And so, I think volunteers, I think it's important for us to look at who the volunteer would be, the season of life they're in. But I've also seen a lot of people get better serving. So it's a few different thoughts on it, but I have watched people that when you give them a bar to meet and when they are serving, I've seen a lot of people really step up and improve that it's actually helped them to have a goal to shoot for. So,
yeah, and I think measuring is just time spent with them. You need to spend time with your team. Whatever you are, it leaks out. An illustration I often use is if you bump into me and I spill coffee, why did I spill my coffee? The usual answer is, well, because you bumped into me. But the truth is I spilled coffee because there's coffee in the cup. And if there had been water in the cup or juice in the cup or tea in the cup, that's what I would have spilled.
no.
And so spending time with people, those things tend to ooze out. And then I would also encourage you, that's a great conversation to have with your senior pastor or your immediate.
Totally.
Every church kind of has a different philosophy on what they expect out of volunteers in different levels. So you would normally expect a higher level of character for someone who's working directly with teens or kids than you might for someone who is in the parking lot. But every church is every leader is going to kind of see that differently, and you have to sort of know what the expectations are for the team that you lead.
Yeah. And I was going to say that earlier, Pastor Landon, that again, it's such a broad range question, but it's a very valid question. But even here at Storyside, I think there's all kinds of people that could say, why is that guy allowed to serve here? Or why is she allowed to? And sometimes they don't know the whole story. And so you may see their struggle, but you don't know the whole story. And so I'm so glad you said that. I think sometimes if you have a team leader, if you have a staff person, sometimes the best thing you could do is go and talk to your lead pastor or vision pastor, and they may bring some more clarity as to why they're allowing them to serve. So instead of, I think sometimes you see someone and you're like, I'm not sure why they're serving. There's probably more to the story.
Right. So you told the story of the 100,000. The young man who prayed for it was 100,000.
100,000, yeah.
So can you give his name again and maybe elaborate on the story a little more?
Yeah. So based on what I had read, his name was Evan Roberts, and it was a revival that broke out in Great Britain. And this particular revival, where they say it was over 100,000, it was called the Welsh, WELSH, the Welsh revival.
Lots of communion.
Yeah. So just amazing to me that would have been part of his prayer for 100,000 souls, and then to see it come to pass in one revival. But just to encourage people, really, that don't get caught up in underestimating what God can do in your life. And I think sometimes when you talk to people, they do it all the time. I don't have the right contacts. I don't know enough people. I don't have the finances or resources. So sometimes we almost cart before the horse a little bit. But I think sometimes we get so caught up in all of the details and all of that, instead of just saying, what, God, I want to believe to the brim. And if you can use me, use me. So I hope people's faith is challenged tonight.
Right. Well, here's a good one. So this is maybe a little more of a theological question, and that is, if I have the character of Jesus, can I perform miracles in Jesus' name? So I guess there's this connection that Jesse's trying to get us to see between a person's character and the ability to do the miraculous.
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I can't speak for if I had the character of Jesus. I think there might have been times I've had a few characteristics of Jesus. But man, that would be a tough one to have the character and totality of Jesus. But I definitely believe that when we are, and I don't want to sound self-serving. Again, you know your own life, but I do think when Micah is seeking first and prioritizing the presence of God, there is a sensitivity, I think, to the Spirit of God and the gifts of the Spirit. I just know in my own life that I definitely see more miracles when I'm spending time with Him, and those things become more evident in my life. And so, I would challenge everyone, and I've said it 2 or 3 times tonight about the simplistic side of it, but don't get too busy that you don't have time to pray. And in my 30 years, I've had it. So I'm not speaking second or third hand. There has been times in my 30 years I've not had a healthy prayer life. And yet we still went through weeks and meetings and messages. And there's been other seasons where I felt like I craved it. I was hungry for it. And if you're looking at those two extremes, I think the gifts of the Spirit and the sensitivity of the Spirit and miracles, according to your question, what can come out of the power of prayer. And so just don't underestimate it, the power of prayer. And, I love what Pastor Jensen, if you've not watched Pastor Jensen's message on prayer, I want to challenge all of you to just Google some of those in the next few weeks. When he talks about you need a place, so he has different things that he breaks down with prayer, but how Jesus had a place of prayer. And so if you always just leave it up to when you have free time, don't do that. Have a place of prayer, have some times of prayer. But his messages on prayer are amazing. And it's really challenging to make sure that prayer is a priority in your life.
Yes. And Mary did say something that I think really contributed to the conversation. She told the servants, whatever he says, you do. So is this stage where you are obedient, you do what God's asked you to do, and then it really is up to him to do the miracle. Because I think sometimes we can get into a way of thinking that says, well, like I'm praying, I'm reading my devotion, I I'm doing it right. I'm not really struggling with any like habitual sin.
Right.
I'm doing good. I'm making progress spiritually, but the miracle's still not happening. The ministry's not growing. I'm lacking that. And that whatever it is, you brought out beautifully one side of it, which is being willing to do whatever God asked you to do. But then to be able to look at God and say, well, I'm giving you my whatever, but now it's going to be up to you because I can't turn this water into wine. And it's really good. I'm going to be okay if you don't do it, because it's really just up to you.
Yeah, it was Pastor Pat. Sorry, I saw your question on here. Pastor Jensen Franklin.
Yeah.
So I saw them asking about prayer.
That's great. Okay, yeah, several more, and we're kind of running short on time here. So let's do a little rapid fire if that works for you, Pastor. Talk about processing emotions whenever others have walked away too soon. So you're going to a church, you believe that God's going to do something special through the ministry. Friends, small group, people that go to small group with you, whatever it might be, they walk away too soon. How do you guard your own emotional well-being during those times?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. You know what I mean? So that's the part that I think we all need to realize. I went my first year of Bible college, I think we had 55 in our class. And last count, I think there was 6 or 7 of us that were in any type of like full-time ministry or anything. So a lot of great people, and they've gone on to do some great things, but I'm just saying that numerically, I think it's going to happen. There's going to be people that walk away from things you're still passionate about. You know, even personally, and again, I want to be very honorable and respectful of my parents, but that rocked me. You know, my dad used to do 21 days of fasting and prayer, and you know, at times my dad would have been like my hero. Like I want to preach like that. I want to pray like that. And so that part rocked me. You know, my dad the last year probably has been really doing well and healing and trying to get back on track in his life. But I guess my answer to that in a short version would just be, you know, basically, you know, solidify your relationship with God and, you know, basically become resolute. I hope I'm there. You know, I hope at 47 that I'm resolute. You know, I know it's an old song, but like take the whole world, but give me Jesus. I'm not, you know, everyone else can decide to do something else or walk away. COVID could come or go, budgets could come or go, people could stay or leave, but I really want to finish my course. And so will there be emotions? There has been for me, you know, on I love all the personality tests, but you know, with Myers-Briggs, I'm an ESTJ. You know, my thoughts, my thinking is much higher than my feelings. But when people walk away, my feelings can definitely get in there. What few I have, they can definitely get in there. And so, you know, whoever was asking the question, I know it hurts when people leave and when people walk, but I think our connection has to be to Jesus Christ, you know, but I think the emotions will come for sure.
There's grieving there, and also because I don't believe the person who asked that was a senior leader, so I would really encourage you as well to, if you have a relationship with some people that are walking away, often for our senior pastors, for our leaders, it's like Jesus, you know, the crowd leaves and he looks at his disciples and says, well, are you going to go
too? Yeah.
What's happening with you? And so if you haven't done so, just to affirm where you stand with your pastor, let him know that your friends may be making decisions, but that you're still faithful and loyal and still have a heart for the house, can go a really long way in how we can serve our pastors. Let's see. Let's do one more here. We're at 7:30, but they're great. Oh, here's a great one. And this is going to open this one up. But what is one of the greatest dangers to a minister's character?
I would say, I mean, I would have a few answers on that. You know, I think one of the first thoughts that would come to mind of course, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. But I would sum all of those things up in just saying it's so easy. It's so easy to fall prey to affirmation. And I'm not talking just the love language words of affirmation. I think in social media, it's the retweets, it's the likes, it's the you're awesome, you're great. And so we often want to say, I'm not a man pleaser. I'm a God pleaser. I'm not a man pleaser. We can say that, but then so much of what we do, we can start to leaning towards, that affirmation that comes from people. And so most people are not going to want to put a post up that gets 13 likes, or one retweet. I mean, I've read articles before where this generation, if they do that, they'll delete it. Like if it's not gaining any traction, delete. But the danger is it's so much deeper than social media. You can start getting, it doesn't matter if it's sexually, when people start telling you, love the shirt, love this, love that, you look so, you're working out, whatever it is. That affirmation can set in. And then there's the next 100. I know we're out of time, but there's the next 100 things where, whether it's social media or sexually, it sounds very King James, version-ish to be like lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, pride of life. But we got to be so careful that we don't start getting our approval from all of those places. And we forget I need approval from God. I'm not Jesus coming up out of the water. I'm Micah sitting in an office in Belleville, Ohio. But when I put my head on my pillow tonight, I want heaven to be able to say, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And that's worth more than 500 likes on Facebook. And that's worth better than a retweet or a bunch of followers on Instagram or stories or snaps and just a reminder, I say it to me, but I would say it to all of us, that if you look at, if the 2025 Micah could talk, or if the 2030 Landon could talk to us right now, I think they would remind every student, every leader on here tonight, don't let your character get sidetracked by the crowd. I really think it would tell us that, because the crowd will try to pull us every which way, and it could be everything from affirmation to opinions to pressure. With everything going on in 2020, it doesn't matter if it's racially, politically, anything else. Like the crowd is just pulling us every which way, and to make sure that I'm pleasing Him. And so that would be my first thought, just to be really careful that you don't let your character start being dictated and directed by the crowd.
So good. So good.
I think the crowd can tell us a lot in 2020. I know we're out of time, but the crowd can start telling you, that's no big deal. You can do that. You can say that. You can go there. Everyone's doing it. But just having gentle reminders in God's presence to go back to, I didn't give my life to the crowd. When I was 5 years old in Montague, Prince Edward Island, and when I was 16 in Woodstock and said, yes, I thought God was calling me to the ministry, I didn't give my life to the crowd. I gave my life to Christ. And so just to remind myself that I want to please Him. And so a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, but what does He say?
And I think what's so great about that in this season, once again, as you've alluded to, is that we've always said that you can never please everybody. But we do spend most of our ministry trying to do that, if we're honest, trying to not rock the boat too much, to say things like, okay, I want to say it this way to this crowd. And I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to put a different angle on it so that this crowd's okay with it.
Totally.
It has not allowed us that luxury. So people have very strong opinions on whether you should be open or closed, or how you should respond to the racial injustice that we've experienced, how you should respond to the upcoming election. And really, there's no sort of like double talk or creative ability to keep everyone happy. So you really have to be hearing from God and having your heart before God.
And I think there's a ton of pressure with it right now. You know what I mean? I ask myself almost every day, everything you just shared, how many of my actions are a byproduct of the pressure from people? And my heart goes out to pastors and churches and leaders. I just think there is such a pull right now to try to appease the masses, but I hope even as leaders, I think there's 110, 20, 30, whatever's on here tonight, but I would love for us to finish the race and know that we pleased him. So, and that's easier, I think, said sometimes than it is done, but that's my hope.
Great. Well, Pastor, thank you so much for joining us. It was great. I think that the chat, I think we might have broke the chat box. It's been so good feedback. We definitely want to have you back on. And then I know you probably want to give a shout out. You have several staff members that have recently joined DLI, members of your team. So
I do. So they're at one of our other locations about 15 minutes away, but I think there's 12 or 13 or 14 of them. So
great.
Shout out to some of our story side staff. Look, I think there's a couple location pastors and some of our leaders. So I love them all. I'm very proud of them.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Pastor Landon. For real.